It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
It is remarkable that the Panthers refused to comply with Murtaugh's order, even though it extended the trial by 6 weeks, during which they were forced to remain in New York City's brutal carceral system. The harrowing experience of Panther Lee Berry offers a particularly acute example of what they experienced. Berry was in the Veterans Administration Hospital being treated for epilepsy when the NYPD appeared at his bedside, and he was hauled downtown, arraigned, and saddled with an unattainable bail. Berry was then taken to the Manhattan House of Detention, also known as the Tombs, where he was thrown in a concrete cell with no mattress and held under 23-hour lockup. Berry remained in the Tombs for 8 months, during which he had more than a dozen epileptic seizures for which he received minimal medical attention. On another occasion, after failing to stand upon command, a guard savagely beat him with a blackjack. Lee Berry's wife, Marva Berry, led a protracted legal and political battle that resulted in her husband finally being transferred to the prison ward of Bellevue Hospital. But while there, his condition only worsened. At Bellevue, Lee Berry developed blood clots, pneumonia, and a hole in his lung and was subjected to an unnecessary appendectomy. His hostile treatment at the hands of penal authorities and medical professionals exemplified the long-standing grievances of incarcerated people across the nation. No, it's just crazy when you think about it. It's just like, damn, yo.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1.
The rise of prison struggles. Like the Panthers, most of those arrested brought their philosophies with them into the prisons. Likewise, most had outside support committees to one degree or another, so that this influx of political prisoners linked the struggle behind the walls with the struggles in the outside local communities. The combination set off a beehive of political activity behind the walls, and prisoners stepped up their struggle for political, African, Islamic, and academic studies, access to political literature, community access to prisons, an end to arbitrary punishments, access to attorneys, adequate law libraries, relevant vocational training, contact visits, better food, health care, housing, and a myriad of other struggles.
On the other side of the wall, the struggle to defend the Panther 21 was gaining momentum, as Gerald Lefcourt told me.
Well, we had public support by way of demonstrations almost regularly. Mm-hmm. There was one demonstration where 5,000 to 10,000 people marched over the 59th Street Bridge from Manhattan into Queens to go to the jail where everybody was housed, which was an amazing event. And there were other kinds of protests. The Weather Underground was constantly naming us as reasons why they took actions like blowing up police headquarters in New York, putting a bomb outside Judge Murtaugh's house because of the way Joan Bird was treated. So we had all kinds of support.
Under intense public pressure, the prosecution was forced to sever Berry from the trial, and in May of 1970, he was released on a reduced bail amount of $25,000. He was only the second Panther to be bailed out. Back in January, woman-led activist groups raised the $100,000 needed to bail Afeni Shakur out of the Women's House of Detention. The fact that Berry survived his torment and that these exorbitant sums were raised is a testament to the massive political prisoner support and defense apparatus that emerged around the Panthers. Groups such as the Committee to Defend the Panther 21 featured active participation from a range of prominent public figures in entertainment and politics. Although they were imprisoned for political activism and had achieved something akin to celebrity status, the Panthers were not much different from most of the city's jail population. Of the 14,000 people packed within NYC's jail archipelago, the vast majority were Black and Latinx people from economically impoverished and heavily policed communities who remained incarcerated for months and even years because they could not afford to make bail.
The forms of prison struggle ranged from face-to-face negotiations to mass petitioning, letter writing and call-in campaigns, outside demonstrations, class action, lawsuits, hunger strikes, work strikes, rebellions, and more drastic actions. Overall, all forms of struggle served to roll back draconian prison policies that had stood for centuries and to further the development of the new African liberation struggle behind the walls. These struggles would not have been as successful or would have been much more costly in terms of lives lost or brutality endured had it not been for the links to the community and the community support and legal support that political prisoners brought with them into the prisons. Although that support was not always sufficient in quantity or quality, or was sometimes non-existent or came with hidden agendas, or was marked by frequent conflicts, on the whole, it was this combination of resolute prisoners, community support, and legal support which was most often successful in prison struggles.
I mean, you couldn't walk down a street in New York without seeing some handwriting on a wall, free the 21. Afeni showed up 15 minutes late in October of '69 to a hearing. The judge revoked her bail. It was all over the news. There are like 6 prisons, pretrial detention centers in New York. All of them took hostages in response. It was like unbelievable. The Panthers were in Old Branch, Queens detention facility. And in that facility, something like 5 correction officers, give or take, were taken by the prisoners. There was a total shutdown of all the prisons. It was a scene beyond all scenes.
Although most of the rebellious captives did not belong to a political organization, they identified with the Panthers and their young lord. They tore through the jail, captured jail personnel as hostages, and opened the cell doors of 9 of the Panther 21 defendants, all of whom were being isolated from the general population on the 7th floor. The rebels elected leadership committees of 6 men, including Panther Lumumba Shakur, Afeni's husband. That the demands the captives issued to the state had much in common with the BPP's 10-point platform demanded for Black people outside prison walls reflected the abysmal condition of Black life in the urban ghetto. The FBI kept close watch as the rebels demanded the cessation of pervasive state-sanctioned brutality, improvement to prison conditions, better medical care, enhanced access to educational materials, a jury of their peers for the Panther 21, and the immediate reinstatement of Afeni Shakur's bail. The rebels maintained control of Branch, Queens for 5 days, during which simultaneous insurgencies emerged in the Tombs, in which some Panthers on trial for a lesser-known conspiracy participated, as well as 3 other carceral facilities. It was in the context of this multi-sided rebellion that Mayor John Lindsay acceded to the seemingly outlandish demand that an emergency bail review hearing be held on the grounds of the rebel-controlled jail. On October 3rd, 1970, while the rebels held hostages on the top floor, a panel of 3 state Supreme Court judges oversaw proceedings in a room adjacent to the warden's office. One by one, the panel summoned pretrial detainees that had been nominated by the rebels. Each of them selected Gerald Lefcourt, a young white member of the Panthers' legal defense team, as their legal representative.
I went out to Queens because the mayor's people called me and said, "What are we going to do here?" So I said, well, I'll talk to them. There was a inmates committee, and they all were covered. Their faces were covered. But I said, I have to get up. They threw furniture on all the staircases. We couldn't get up the stairs. The elevator wasn't working. So I asked them to get me a fire engine cherry picker to lift me up 5 stories so I could talk to them.
Wow.
I have a picture of this cherry picker and me up 5 stories. It was the front page of the Daily News in New York. And I'm talking to them, and what they want is the bail reviewed for every prisoner in the institution except the Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
So every other prisoner's bail has to be reviewed before they release the hostages. This is communicated to the mayor, to the governor, and the governor, who was then Nelson Rockefeller, got 3 judges to come out to the Branch Queens House of Detention to conduct bail review hearings. And then the first prisoner comes out and they say, do you have a lawyer? And they said, no, I want Gerald Lefcourt. So the judge says, Mr. Lefcourt, representative, I talked to him for 30 seconds and I'd say he has a typical ghetto record.
Mm.
His bail is $15,000. He could probably afford $25.
Mm.
Okay, granted, $25. Out he went.
The result of the hearing was remarkable. 9 captives were immediately released on their own recognizance, and an additional 4 had their bails reduced to $25 each, securing the captives' immediate release. He calls it the first ever legal jailbreak.
A legal jailbreak. 21 people were released during those bail hearings. It was the most astonishing thing ever. And then they finally said, we've shown good faith. Go back up into the cherry picker. And they said they'll vote on it. And they voted to release the hostages, but every prisoner, particularly the Panthers, had to be accompanied by a private citizen, a priest, or somebody to the new prison, because that jail was totally ruined. And so 1, 2, or 2 or 3 at a time, they came down from the cherry picker and went into buses off to other jails. And the last one with the keys was Lumumba. He was amazing.
Eruption of collective illegality compelled the arbiters of law and order to adhere to their own standards. 2 days later, as rebels in jails across the city were releasing their hostages, Judge Murtaugh reinstated Afeni Shakur's bail.